Morning, everyone. Listening to Kate's wonderful poetry at the beginning gave me a slight existential moment. I don't normally question my northern credentials, but I am a professor at the University of Exeter at the moment, and the organisation I lead is based in Swindon, but it does have a remit to fund research in the arts and humanities across the United Kingdom. And I did have 14 years of my career here at the University of Leeds, a wonderful 14 years. And although I don't normally refer to this in public, I am a supporter and shareholder of Mansfield Town Football Club. So you can judge whether the credentials are solid or not. The Arts and Humanities Research Council has just published its delivery plan. Delivery plans, I think it would be fair to say, are not normally riveting reads, but this is 15 pages which distills our strategic intent, if you like, what we're going to do over the next 5 years. And I would recommend it to you. I think it's probably the shortest sort of summary of what we're about and where we think we're heading. And at the start of the document, the first thing we do really is to highlight how arts and humanities research isn't only a good in itself, but is part of a wider cultural system. And we explain how much of the research that we support feeds directly and indirectly into the arts and cultural sector, the creative economy, if you like, whether that's in terms of the performing arts or galleries, libraries, archives and museums, or our environmental and urban heritage, or the digital and design. If after 10 years, and it's our 10th birthday at the moment, the Arts and Humanities Research Council has established itself as a distinctive organisation globally, and we like to think it has, I think it's in no small part because of the significant growth of partnerships with the arts and cultural sector that we've witnessed across all of our schemes. Let me give you a statistic. Since 2010, over 1,000 partner organisations listed across 500 Arts and Humanities Research Council awards. At any one point in time, almost a half of that portfolio of 500 awards leveraging additional funding, largely, if not exclusively, I'm guessing, through the rich variety of partnerships that our researchers have forged with the arts and cultural sector. I don't think it's any exaggeration to say that the UK's leadership in heritage and the creative and digital sectors of the economy depends on the strength of those partnerships. And I think it's a strength which is doubly anchored or twice invested, if you like, in, on the one hand, a shared set of beliefs and values and motivations between the university and cultural sector, and on the other hand, the ability of those two sectors to find new and more imaginative and more productive ways of working with each other. Now, I suspect that much of the conversation today, rightly understandably, is going to be about the latter, but we shouldn't lose sight of the former, and I'd like to come back to values and beliefs at the end of my talk when I say something about equality and diversity, which I lead on for the 7 UK research councils. Suffice for the moment to say that if you look at those foundational and fundamental statements in our delivery plan, things like how the arts and humanities change the way in which we see the world, or how they open our minds to cultural difference and human diversity across time, or how they nurture artistic and creative talent, or how they help us to understand the fabric of our society and question who we are and how we live. I think all of those things provide bridges between our universities and the wider cultural hinterland in which they're located, to say nothing of the shared interest that we have in digital technologies and how they are expanding the ways in which we experience and explore culture. Now, I was very privileged in my time at Leeds to be part of a large and vibrant and very successful arts faculty. In fact, such is the importance of the arts and humanities at Leeds that the university has long and very wisely felt it important to maintain not one but 2 arts faculties. And 2 of my colleagues who've led those faculties so ably, I think Frank is here today and David Cooper isn't able to be with us. But part of that privilege was to watch a partnership between Leeds University and Opera North flourish. It transformed itself in my time from a set of collaborations between academics in the 2 faculties and Opera North to a university level and institution-wide strategic partnership which had high visibility and a strong profile at the top of both organisations. And I think we had Richard, much to thank you, and also Michael Arthur for that and having the vision to see and drive it through. It was a partnership that was very successful in promoting practice-based research, very successful in connecting research to teaching, in providing new opportunities for student placements and internships, and so much more. But for me, actually, part of that so much more was that the partnership was a galvanizing and energizing force. It contributed, I think, to a more general feeling in my faculty that there were bigger goals to aim for and different types of futures to be grasped. More recently, in my role as Interim Chief Executive of the Arts and Humanities Research Council, I've continued to be struck by how partnerships are a spur to discovering new and more inventive ways to share research with the public, but also how partnerships can change the way in which organisations think and act. Let me give you just one example. We've recently at the AHRC been looking at 10 years of funding of research into early modern drama, performance and cultural history. It's clear from having done that review that the research that we've funded has produced a suite of research-led, site-specific performances, that it's enabled new ways of imagining the potential of heritage spaces, new forms of historical interpretation, and new understandings, I think, of the dynamics of early modern theatre. It's also produced different types of visitor experience and different possibilities for outreach activities. The Chief Executive of Historic Royal Palaces recently said to me at an event at their banqueting hall at Westminster that the partnership that Historic Royal Palaces had been able to forge with academics at Brunel and Edinburgh universities had transformed the way in which the organisation researched, interpreted and presented heritage. Well, at a time when local authority investment in arts and culture has declined steeply and councils are being asked to find ever greater savings, I think it would be easy to get carried away with ourselves here. And my experience of the last 4 months has been a tough 4 months of government spending review. On the positive side, I think that experience has been one of making a case for investing in a creative economy, the main premises of which are now familiar and understood and accepted in Business Innovation and Skills, our sponsor department, the DCMS and Treasury, to a greater extent than ever before. So, Peter, I think you're absolutely right about that. But on a more cautious side, I think it's a case that we haven't yet fully crystallised. And the rest of my remarks this morning, therefore, are directed towards what role partnerships may play, or indeed need to play, in helping us to jointly argue our case for public funding. Let me throw out 3 challenges. The first challenge is research. A distinguished journalist at the FT lately remarked to me that the creative economy is something that everyone seems to be enticed by, but no one can quite locate. She observed that we don't quite understand as a country how we've been so good at it, and therefore we've got the fear that we could easily mess it up. Well, I think it would be fair to say that it isn't quite yet fully grasped that the creative economy isn't quite like graphene or nanotechnology or tissue regeneration or antimicrobial resistance. It isn't one thing, and there isn't one intervention that is ever going to sort it out or help it. It's not surprising, therefore, that although I think under my predecessor, Rick Rylance, the Arts and Humanities Research Council was able to transform the place of the creative economy in the research that we fund, I think we've still got a lot of work to do in defining more precisely the place of research in the success of the UK's creative economy. And I think Alistair's absolutely right to throw out the challenge to us of what does research with traction for the cultural sector actually look like and what does it mean. I think that part of that challenge is to better evidence how research is transforming visitor experiences, the possibilities of production and performance, the ways people engage with the past. I think part of the challenge is to better evidence how partnerships are building new research capacities within the arts and cultural sector, that in turn enable arts and cultural organisations to more effectively leverage the research base within universities. So we do need to recognise, that many arts and cultural organisations are building significant research capacities of their own. Research does not just take place within the university sector. I also think, and I want to just pause on this point, that part of the challenge is to better capture and communicate that arts and humanities research is to be celebrated, and this is very much in the vein of Peter's remarks, not only as an economic success story in terms of contributing to the creative industries outpacing other sectors of the economy in a recession. It is partly that. But it's also a map from which we can make sense of where we've come from and where we're heading. It tells us who we are. What I don't want to do here is to return to that debate between the intrinsic and the instrumental. I'm talking about something else. Let me have a go in capturing it. What I think I'm talking about is us all in this room having a stronger sense of what is quintessential as well as what is consequential, and indeed how the latter is so heavily mortgaged on the former. An excessive focus on short-term demonstrable outcomes risks occluding how it's often the long-term, often unpredictable, sometimes serendipitous outcomes of arts and humanities research that produce the biggest and the most valuable impact. Put another way, the uncharted terrain can often be the richest for valuable discovery. Second, the skills pipeline, as Whitehall would label it. In other words, how we ensure that the arts and cultural sectors have the right skills for a sustainable future. The budget at the Arts and Humanities Research Council for research is £98 million annually. That's 2.8% of the total science budget. Let me repeat those figures. £98 million annually is 2.8% of the total science budget. Let me give you another figure. £98 million serves 30% of UK active researchers. I'll pause and let that sink in. 30% of UK active researchers are in the arts and humanities disciplines. That puts huge pressure on doctoral training provision. If we are to continue to nurture, grow, and feed talent into the cultural and creative sectors, we have to address that problem. As a friend of mine once said to me, unlike cars or smartphones, the country's cultural exports can't be cobbled together from mostly foreign components. We can't easily solve the problem by fiscal events and capital injections either, because so much of our capital, as we know, is human, not infrastructural. If there's something that would keep me awake at night, this would be it. And I think our partnerships need to mobilise a case for the importance of investing in the arts and humanities disciplines in order to provide what our cultural and creative industries will need for them to prosper over the next decade and beyond. Thirdly, and in closing, finally, I want to talk about what Peter Bazalgette has described memorably as the creative case for diversity. There should be a role for our partnerships in delivering wider transformations in our organisations, helping to build a depth of diversity in those organisations, helping us to better reflect on the changes that are occurring in our society and the multicultural and multilinguistic communities in which we work, helping us to embrace cultural difference as a source of innovation and creativity rather than to feel threatened by it, and helping us to position arts and humanities disciplines and the cultural sector at the forefront of debates about equality and diversity that I'm sure are set to become more and not less prominent over coming years. Diversity as opportunity, not simply as obligation. If partnerships are set to become a bigger part of our futures, as I'm sure there are, and as the concerns of the university sector expand towards the concerns of the cultural sector, and the concerns of the cultural sector expand towards the concerns of universities, we should expect to be talking about partnerships much more in the coming years. And I think today, therefore, has to be a very welcome contribution to that conversation. Thank you very much.